Pat McDonald, it is time for our annual tradition, one of several. We're not only doing it's there's nostalgia like nostalgia. Not only are we doing the new 2024 thing where every couple months we're looking back at a movie from one of the four's decades. Last time
Yes.
it was 1924. This month we're going to do 2004 and 2024, and it's our
Ooh.
annual Good Friday episode. So we're
So
looking
many.
at yes. So every year we look at a religious themed movie,
Yep.
and this year is we're going at both ends of the spectrum. We're looking at 2004's The Passion of the Christ, which turns 20 this year,
Wow.
unbelievably. And then the brand
Amazing.
new film, the Late Night with the Devil, which just
Yep.
came out in theaters and is going to be on demand, I think, next month. They just announced it. So, yeah, good and evil, the dualities of these two lifelong institutions of God and the devil. But first of all,
Yep.
Pat, how you doing?
I'm doing fine, and as I mentioned to you about Passion of the Christ, this was a real issue for me when it came out. I kind of refused to see it because of some of the stuff that was going on surrounding it, especially the aspect of people being almost required to see it in a sense if you were a certain religious ilk.
Mhm.
And I have to give a shout out to my friend Kathleen Roche. I used to work with her, and she was begging me to see this movie. And I finally saw it. Kathleen, hi. So
So
yeah,
you
that's my preliminary.
so you watched it for the first time for this show.
That is
Wow.
correct. That is correct after being adamant about not seeing it when it came out. So
Yeah, I find that very curious because I understand because there was a lot of hype around the movie, and now that you've seen it, maybe you'll agree or disagree with what I'm about to say, but I feel
okay.
like a lot of it's a weird film. You know, it was directed by Mel Gibson. And the centerpiece, all that anybody wanted to talk about was that it was a film centered on the passion of the Christ, his sentencing and his long march up to Calvary, and the torture, the crucifixion. Like the second hour of the movie is pretty much all of that,
Right.
and that was a lot of the hype around the film. And I was kind of skeptical too. I did go see this in the theater with my wife and a couple of friends, and I was very surprised to find that yes, it's a very graphic, violent, hard to watch film, but with a lot of what I find in Mel Gibson's other films, there's a lot of poetry and symbolism, contrast between the violence and moments of peace in the main characters' lives. So, what's your impression of Passion of the Christ now that you've actually watched it? Do you at all regret having not
No,
seen it earlier on? No.
I don't regret having not seen it earlier on. There were some issues at the time that I was dealing with personally in regard to religion that
Mm.
was part of the factor of me not seeing it. But if I'm going to sum it up, it's Jesus Christ Superstar without the music. You
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
what they follow is right on the path of JC Superstar, and uh, as a movie, I found it hard to judge. I thought there was some real sincerity in it, but you to your point about symbolism and an overriding sense of delicacy that is a mark of Mel Gibson's films. I really didn't see it. I guess I was just focused on the nature of the story, which to me was a straight ahead retelling of the Passion with a little more blood. Now the blood didn't bother me at the time of the release. Hearing about the famous the famous line was a 2 hour snuff film about the crucifixion. Um, I when I was doing some research, I actually came upon the line. It was from a critic from Slate, but he was upset that there wasn't any kind of uh, redirect towards the teachings of Christ. Well, it's called the Passion of the Christ. I think the filmmaker made the decision that he was going to show the passion. He wasn't, and he did do flashbacks to other aspects of his life, which I thought were well done. But I mean, it's the Passion of Christ, dude. You know, what do you expect walking in?
Well, and that's the.
Well, it wasn't directed right.
I mean, that is a perspective, but I don't know that it's a perspective that I can respect from someone who actually watched and paid attention to the movie, besides kind of like having their arms crossed, being like, there's so much violence and all this is 2 hours of snuff. Because when I talk about poetry, I'm talking about the juxtaposition of, you know, every time it gets really dark for Jesus, played, I think, brilliantly by Jim Caviezel, in his darkest moments of torture and suffering, his mind casts back to a moment of serenity where he really is around people that he loves, and he reminds himself of why he's, you know, on earth, to save people, to love people, to teach them to love each other in ways that they just can't fathom. You know, there's the great bit where I think it's the first time when he's ascending the steps to go up to Calvary, sorry. I always get those words mixed up. But there's people spitting at him and throwing stuff at him and beating the hell out of him. And you see his point of view kind of going up this hill. And it flashes to him on the donkey during Palm Sunday, where he's being welcomed, you know, into the village, and there's people smiling and cheering at him. For every person that is, you know, a bystander who's scourging him, there's moments of his mother, you know, trying to sneak through the melee to see her son, or there's the woman who famously, you know, puts the shroud on his face to offer some, you know, relief to wipe the blood off, and it turns out to be, you know, the Shroud of Turin. There are all these. Gibson constantly flashes back and forth and delivers the message of Jesus. He doesn't hit you over the head with it, but he shows without telling what this is all about. I mean, there wasn't like a giant. I mean, we're dropped right into the prayer at the garden. There isn't a, you know, previously on the, you know, the last 33 years. We have to pick up the context as we go.
Well, one thing that was really almost, you know, surprising to me about how the story was told was, as an old altar boy, I did not thousands, but I'll say at least 6 years of doing the Stations of the Cross, right? Was it 6 years? I don't think it was that long. Anyway, Stations of the Cross, which are like almost embedded in my mind. So the fact that he used the Stations of the Cross as a foundation for the story was very interesting to me. There's only 2 that are missing, but they're the 2 that sometimes are not used even in the Catholic mode, as I was reading it. But I picked up on that immediately. I'm like, oh my gosh, the Stations of the Cross. And one thing that, again, as I pointed out before, the suffering of the Christ figure in the film is not really. It wasn't really that overwhelming to me. I knew he was trying to be a little more realistic with it, but it didn't bother me as I thought it would have bothered me had I seen it back in the day. I was focusing on that snuff comment, and that was not a correct characterization of the film at all, in my point of view, seeing it recently.
Right, and I thought about that as well, not specifically the snuff comment, but I do remember there was an air of, you know, critique of sensationalism around the movie, and I thought, you know, I don't think you're going to get the Eli Roth hostile fan to watch The Passion of the Christ and think, oh, that's so cool. You know, the torture is wrapped up in the drama. It's a very sad and moving story. There's nothing about it aside from, I think, admiring the prosthetic effects that, you know, by the time Jim Caviezel is done being whipped and flayed, before he even gets brought out to be crucified, I mean, just his body is just, it's a line, it's like cross-hatching of blood. You can see his ribs sticking out of his flesh. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it was an interesting decision, and I think maybe it was done, number one, because frickin' Gibson's the uber Catholic, and number two, they wanted to distinguish themselves. If you're going to show the Passion of the Christ, you got to go all the way with it. He even recut it for a PG-13 version, but again, I don't know where you cut it to make it less gross. I guess
It's 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes long.
Yeah, exactly. But there was also the controversy about it being anti-Semitic, and again, I'm not inured in the Jewish faith enough to say, oh yeah, there's definitely some anti-Semitism. But again, in research, it is saying that this has been a accusation of the Jewish people for years and years and years and years and years, something that I never participated in or knew about. So to show Caiaphas and the high priests as being the guys who directed the crucifixion, and they're supposedly Jewish, okay, but I don't know. I don't see any Semitism in it, but some people do, I guess.
I think, and that is a whole other conversation that I don't also feel qualified to have.
Right.
But
You're absolutely right. Qualification. That's a good word of saying.
But that said, watching the movie, that was something else that was in the back of my head, because I've heard that argument. There was some TV show back in the day, I think some skinhead yelled, "You killed our Christ," or something like that.
Right.
But it's one of those things where the story of Jesus is wrapped up in the fact that he was, Jewish. He came to be a revelation to all people, but he started off in his community. And because his teachings were so radical and went against the teachings of the people that were in, his church or his assembly at the time, they just couldn't tolerate it. So they had to get rid of him because he was a revolutionary. Now, the fact that they happened to be Jewish, and you could look at it and say, well, they were the villains of the story. I think it's a bit of a stretch,
Very much so.
in the demented mind, to say, okay, that means that all Jews from now on are like evil people, and it just is this scourge upon the earth. I mean, that's just wrong. It's it just doesn't hold up.
Well, given Gibson's anti-Semitic remarks later, I mean, he had that famous incident where he went raving in a drunken rant, and an officer accusing them of being Jewish, and that's why he was being arrested. That probably added more credence to, oh, let's go look at the Passion of Christ again and find some anti-Semitic things in it. But again, I don't have as we've mentioned, I don't have the expertise in which to really delve into it that far. As far as I was seeing, was the very Catholic story that I knew growing up as a kid, that I knew going through those Stations of the Cross as an altar boy, and the whippings and the extreme violence of it was just a choice to be made about Passion. So.
Well, and that's the other thing, and that Gibson's arrest is another bit of what I might call historical sensationalism too, because yes, he did make some anti-Semitic remarks while he was intoxicated and being arrested. So I have not heard other incidents of him, doing these kinds of things or participating with certain like anti-Semitic groups or rhetoric or whatever. I do know he's a giant Catholic, but Catholic does not necessarily equal anti-Semite.
Right.
Plus, well, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to add that he did grow up in a household that was evangelical Catholic, which is the most extreme end of the Catholic religion. And his father has been maybe accused, or maybe has said things that could be interpreted as anti-Semitic. Now, again, I'm talking off the top of my hat here, so I just don't know what the specifics are, but that was put into the pile of at the time that Gibson made his remarks, which pretty much canceled his career, as we know. So
yeah, I mean, he's definitely had a resurgence in the last 10 years, showing up in smaller films, but I think very good movies. And I was going to say before that last kind of interlude, I've talked to Ian and Esham Nelms, two brothers who are filmmakers who directed Gibson in a movie called Fat Man, where he played Santa Claus a few years ago. And I asked them during the interview, I'm like, so what was it like working with Mel Gibson and all this controversy, and how did you find him as a person? And they unequivocally said he was one of the kindest, like nicest people and creative collaborators they'd ever met, and they didn't even have like a whiff of anything untoward in his character. Now, I've talked to these guys a few times now, so I want to believe that they believe it and that they're not, snowing me or, making something up to protect Mel Gibson. And I don't want to relitigate his character. It's just that, it's all of this stuff, this media stuff that gets wrapped up in art, which is, I think, how we started this conversation. The conversation can pollute the actual art itself, which is, something I don't think will ever escape.
I really don't have an opinion about the relative nature of Mel Gibson. Obviously, I have experienced the news stories, and as a film person, I saw he, created a pathway that got him off the main star path to, more independent films. But as far as his character, I really don't have an opinion. I don't know if it's fair or unfair. I don't know how deep he is in what his rant was. So again, no opinion on it. And I would take the opinion of somebody who worked with him over and above any hearsay or opinion that I might have based on what he may or may not have said. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I can't really, I have no opinion really. Did I think he got a raw deal? I don't know. It really is about the community, and the community said, hey, this guy is obviously an anti-Semite, so we're not going to hire him for anything. That's what happened.
Yeah. It's the reason I bring that up is that, we're looking at the depiction of Jews in the Passion of the Christ and what gets the headlines, much like the overall film, that the violence gets the headlines. When it comes to the anti-Semitism, we are looking at Caiaphas and the sort of the council who are, doing everything they can to manipulate the Roman government to, let them have him. But if you look at almost like, well, not almost all, because there are a lot of, angry people in the crowd who are, stoning him and cursing him and spitting on him. But there are quite a few incidents of people who are clearly uncomfortable with it, who we must assume are also, Jewish people who reach out with compassion, who are upset. I mean, Pontius Pilate's wife, Claudia, who is not, Jewish, but she was, a compassionate character, and was rather, her stomach churned almost as much when she saw what they had done to him as when her husband said, I wash my hands of this. You guys, I don't know what to do. And she's like, she turned her back.
Character.
She was, and there's so much detail in terms of the supporting characters that we get in here. Mary, Mary, who was played by, I want to get this right, Maya Morgenstern. I thought she was a great, a really nice version of Mary, because she wasn't seen as this otherworldly kind of sainted figure. She was just seen as a mom, and not even a mom who had experienced like an immaculate conception, but just, those parts really broke my heart. And something I didn't pick up on until this viewing was we do get an image of Satan, who's a sort of androgynous, pale, almost snake-like figure who keeps showing up in the crowd. She is dressed very much like the parallel to Mary, in like the black kind of like shroud robes, and she kind of loses that, or it loses that at the end, when we see Satan in hell. But I found that those parallels to be fascinating, because sometimes you see Jesus looking at his mother, and then you see Satan looking at her or him. Yeah, I'm not quite sure exactly what that means, but again, it's sort of this visual symmetry or poetry.
Well, my opinion about Satan is a holy, holy made up conceit. It's like WHOLLY, like I'm
Hmm.
Holy Week. Uh, it's just to me, it's a made up conceit. It's one of those things in a religion. Well, if you have the ultimate good, there has to be the ultimate evil. So how do we characterize that ultimate evil? Well, we create devils in hell, and we have to have a leader. So how about Satan? Uh, I just you could give any bad characteristic to Satan. You can I mean, people bring it up in the media sometimes. Speaking of the media, how can you bring up a character like Satan when we're still on a faith-based journey with God and Jesus? So I mean, to me, that's more legitimate than saying, oh well, if we have Jesus, we have to have Satan. We'll discuss that in Late Night with the Devil, of course, too. But it's just it's an uncomfortable concept for me, and for the Satan to show up in the Passion was, again, a nice piece of symbolism if you're going to show both sides of the coin. But for me, not doesn't move me at all. So
I you just opened up an entire like 3-hour conversation about being okay with the concept of God and Jesus, but not the ultimate evil. Not sure exactly how to unpack that. But in
it's
terms
just
of hmm, what?
it's just not. No, I'm just saying that legitimate faith, which I really admire, by the way. And I'm not a believer, but legitimate faith. My mother, bless her, is a true believer, and people who are true believers have to have all these ducks in a row. Oh, okay. Um, you have to have the ducks in a row, and it includes the ultimate evil. I'm just saying that in those ducks in a row, you can take out the ultimate evil for me, because to me, it's a conceit that is just rises out of the fact that because we have an ultimate good in God and Jesus, we have to have a ultimate evil. Are you a religious man?
Um, I'm a Christian. I don't go
Okay.
to church.
Okay.
This is a probably, I like you, I grew up Catholic and I was an altar boy and the whole thing, but I've struggled with faith my entire life, and it's only within the
All
last
right.
probably 2 or 3 years when I started reading the Bible. I'm like 10 pages away from finishing Revelation, so this is very exciting.
Interesting. Interesting.
Um, but it's yeah, I can't quite explain it except to feel
No,
genuinely moved by
nobody
revelation. Not no pun
nobody
intended.
should explain anything in that area, I think. Even
But
non-believers shouldn't have to explain themselves.
well, just I think this is a good transition point to Late Night with the Devil, because I do want to
Sure.
close on the Satan point. What I liked about the depiction of Satan in this movie is
Hmm.
he shows up, basically to taunt, to torture, Jesus. There's that image of
Right.
Satan with like the little baby, which could be seen as like an antichrist, or more of the dark parallel to Jesus and his mother. But also, I just think about that last shot of Satan in hell. That is the eternal damned, like it's back to the joylessness and the eternal torture. While he is watching Jesus go through this passion, you almost get the sense if it's the one time he's allowed to feel any kind of joy, because God is on earth in the form of man. He's getting his ass kicked. And he had
Hmm.
tried, to tempt him, on the mount, I
Right.
think,
No, in
sometime
the
earlier.
desert.
Right, in the desert, right, as we saw in Martin Scorsese's Last Temptation of Christ.
Very
Um,
good.
but Jesus rejected him, and so this is like yeah, this is what you get, probably fully aware that of how things are going to ultimately turn out, but just taking that little bit of relish in watching him, get beaten up. And I think that was one of the strongest points of the film, and watching Caviezel's performance especially, is just selling this idea of a man, God made flesh, going through this
Right.
to take on the sins of the world and being wholly tortured. But even just knowing, like, what if I had to do that? What if I knew I was going to spend the rest of eternity in paradise? Could I still put myself through 10 hours of that? And I'd like to say yes, because my faith would carry me through. But then I look at the flayed ribs, and they don't show his scrotum, but I can only imagine what that looked like. But yeah, so
scrotum.
That's the name of my new punk band. No, but yeah, I was happy to revisit it. It's only the second time I've ever watched it, because I can't. It's not something I could bring myself to watch, again, except for the show. But I'm glad you finally got to watch it and that you didn't hate it.
No, I want to tell you the difference between me now and 20 years ago. Having gone through some loss, I think is a very profound way of understanding what your situational beliefs are. My acceptance is the key to this whole thing. La-di-da, accept. But the point is, I wasn't accepting 20 years ago. I was, I don't know if I could call it anger, but I could certainly call it a rejection based on, why did I have to waste my time with this, right? Now I feel like, well, there is a functioning part of me that is culturally connected to that teaching, right? It's something I've always been drawn to. It's something that I respect in others. And even though fundamentally I can't believe the Godhead part of it, I certainly can believe the philosopher part of it. For all his profundities that he was saying to people as they were approaching him, I thought one of them should have been, for God's sakes, can I get a shower? So that's what I'll end on.
That'll be the tagline for the show. No,
I was very pleased, number one, that it wasn't a bad experience for me, right? That all this fear I had about it can be thrown away, and to say, well, it's a very reverential treatment of the Passion story. And that's basically my conclusion.
Well, now we're going to move on to a very reverential treatment of late night talk show host circa 1977.
Very good.
Colin and Cameron Cairnes. They're an Australian sibling duo, and they've made this movie, Late Night with the Devil, starring David Dastmalchian, and this is his first leading role, right?
Yes, I believe so. I would have. Well, you could say that Animals was a leading role as well.
Okay.
His independent film. And then I think he made another independent film with Colin Shiffey, and I can't remember precisely what the character was, but
okay. So
see me getting darker as the sun started setting. But
hey, that happened at the end of the Passion of the Christ as well, Pat. Or is this the end times? No,
right. Trying to get more light on them.
Well, I was going to say, your face is turning more red as we're starting to talk about Late Night with the Devil. But no, this was one of my most anticipated movies of the year, because I heard the premise of it. I saw the trailer. It's got a fantastic teaser trailer. The conceit is, it's Halloween night, 1977. There's a TV show host who's a rival to Johnny Carson named Jack Delroy, played by Dastmalchian. And in order to get a ratings boost, he has on this this doctor, like a psychiatrist, and her patient, a little girl named Lily, who's about 12 or 13 years old, probably 13, who was the survivor of a satanic cult. There was sort of a Waco situation, but it was in a neighborhood, oddly enough. And she survived, but she apparently has a demon or the devil inside of her. So Jack thinks, hey, I'll get this on live television. It'll be great. Now, in one of the best, I mean, the best opening 10 minutes of any film I've ever seen. They set the stage for a brilliant found footage movie. There's an announcer that we don't know who he is or what he is, but just talking about the events of Halloween night 1977 that like changed TV viewing forever. And we're
Right.
about to present to you a collage of on-air footage, behind the scenes stuff, and various other media. And it starts off with a montage of Jack Delroy's career, some kind of weird stuff he was involved in, his wife who died of cancer a year before the broadcast. And it really kind of drops us in to this show. And I love movies about movies and TV, so this was right up my alley
Right.
anyway. But just to see where it went, I felt like I was in the audience of this show, getting continually freaked out by what was going on.
Well, interestingly enough, I have a little more basis of time and place. Obviously, with the years on me, I was 17 years old in 1977, so I was aware of. I was incredibly fascinated with the Johnny Carson thing. It was just something. I think one of the reasons I love this so much is because adults could act that way and still get away with it. And it was nothing like the adults around me. So this was something that, had I been a little more cognizant of it, I probably would have went more into the show business angle as a career. But in the sense I did, but not to that extent, because I loved it. I loved it. And I was so endeared to what the Cairnes brothers did with this premise, because of the ethos and mythos of late night talk show television in the 1970s and the network thing. Plus, I totally remember the satanic panic, as they like to call it back in the day, where The Exorcist was the film that lit the fuse of that, but it went on for a good 12 to 15 years after.
Oh yeah,
after the Exorcist, and I thought it was an excellent exploration of what that meant at the time. But I mean, this is a big but for me. I didn't feel. Did you feel like it was working on a couple levels, whereas we may be hypnotized as a viewer to believe this stuff happened, but we're not necessarily sure it did happen, as the way that the cinematic and storytelling aspect of the film was. Did you have any feeling about that?
Yes and no. I've only seen it once, and I'm eager to watch it again. Although
I am too, and I haven't seen it since. Let me qualify that. I haven't seen it since the International. So
when was that? That was
a good 4 or 5 months ago. So yeah.
Okay.
But I didn't have time to go back and watch it. I did want to, and I didn't get a chance. So I'm just
no worries. I mean, it's still fresh. It's still fresh in your mind. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It burned into my soul there. I mean, it really did. I thought it was a very effective horror film.
It was almost too effective.
Okay. No, I got you on that one. Go ahead, but I want to hear.
Well, no, I want to get back to the question you asked me a second ago, but I want to just kind of share an anecdote which ties back into our previous conversation.
Okay.
After we finished Late Night with the Devil, and it's not really a spoiler to say that Lily, the little 13-year-old girl, is actually possessed by Satan or a high-ranking demon, and because we kind of see this in the trailer. She, for that brief second, she kind of like flashes, and see the monster face and all that. But there is something about that actress and the way that the character kept looking at the camera, kept asking like, oh, which camera do I look at? Like she was trying to put the national audience under her spell. And then what happens to her body at the very end of the movie when she is fully revealed as this entity is something that I don't think I'd ever seen presented before, which is something that as an old kind of cynical, embittered film critic, we don't get to see it that much. Usually it's something that looks like it's out of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, or the generic, creepy kid from, these horror movies about like 8-year-old girls with like long black hair or drawing pictures in crayon or something. But and this is kind of getting into spoiler territory, so if you haven't watched Late Night with the Devil,
Yeah.
turn back now. But the way her face kind of splits, her eyes are on fire, and there seems to be not only fire, but almost like electricity, like lightning or television static coming out of her head. It really freaked me out. And after it was over, yeah, but after the movie was over, I had to go downstairs and change out the laundry at my creepy basement. And I couldn't get that image out of my head. So
wow.
do you know what I did, Pat?
What'd you do?
Before I went downstairs, I picked up my Bible and I brought it with me. And I gotta say,
oh, dude,
the imagery disappeared. I felt comforted. Like, it's okay. You don't need to think about this. It's probably putting bad thoughts in your head. Think about something else. And I did. I thought about the laundry, and then I brought it back upstairs.
well, that's quite remarkable. But I would go on the side. Okay, go finish your thought. I'm sorry.
Well, I want to go back to the idea of hypnotism, because there's a character
I wanted to segue into.
Right, there's a character in the movie named Christu. No, the first character is Christu. He's played by Faisal Bazi, who is sort of a TV psychic, and he gets visions, but it's great, right? Christu, because he kind of it's funny because it's not something. It happens, I think, twice, but he comes out. They've got this kind of like Indian sitar music, but he's also speaking like a vaguely Spanish/Indian accent. You don't know quite where he's from. But then when things start to go wrong for his character, he completely breaks and goes back into like this, almost like a blank California accent. And then he switches back on and off. It's very subtle. But there is another character named Carmichael Haig, played by Ian Bliss, who is a former psychic / con man who has spent the last half of his career debunking TV personalities who claim to speak with the dead or have clairvoyance or whatever. And
he was based on a real guy from the 70s.
Yeah, I'd seen a few people like that, watching talk shows in like the 80s and 90s, but he's definitely an archetype. But he's so great because the performance is not one-dimensional. We see him go through a full character arc of utter cynicism to, at the very end, belief and horror. But at one point, he does go through an exercise where he tries to prove that this whole thing with Lily the girl was a matter of mass hypnosis. And at a certain point, it's kind of like the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, where there's a breaking point in the film where from a certain point, you no longer know if you're in the real world or the dream world. And they carry that idea through like the last half hour of the film, so that by the end, to your point, Pat, I don't know where the TV broadcast ended. And did he have a psychic break? Did he end up in hell? What is going on?
Well, that's and also too, I believe that that's part of the brilliance of the film. We don't actually realize or know, because it is a fictional world. It's creating a fictional world. There was no guy named Jack Delroy from the 70s, but let us presume that this worked on a parallel basis with Carson and Cavett and all those guys, and he actually existed. And now we're going to go into this realm of reality, which was the basis for the satanic panic of the era. But we're going to bring in elements of hypnosis and a debunker at the same time. So now we can work on these two levels, these two planes of existence, plus the fictional element of Jack Delroy, and throw it all into the storytelling stew and let you make up your own mind, which again, brilliant stuff. Very effective. Very effective.
Yeah, I mean, it's rare that I see something that is so fully realized and so self-contained. I mean, this isn't like the setup for I'll be heartbroken if they say, "Hey, coming soon, Late Night with the Devil Part 2."
Yeah.
Something like that, but it feels
No, you
like
got to
they
leave it where it is.
right, but the
You
Cairnses
could do a prequel.
no, no. The only reason I'd want a prequel is to see more David Dastmalchian because I think in
Yeah.
this role, this is his sweet spot. He's played a lot of. If people don't know who we're talking about, he's one of the biggest like in demand character actors of
Yeah.
our generation, or the I guess the younger generation.
Well, right
You know,
now, as we're talking right now in the cinema world, yes.
right. I mean, he was the Polka Dot Man in the
Yeah.
Suicide Squad. He was in Dune, the Dune Part 1. He's been in a lot of. He was in The Dark Knight. He's played really kind of shifty, slimy, awkward
Villainous,
character.
bad
Yes,
word. Yeah. This is a
but
real departure.
it is. And what the movie does, I think, that it almost betrays the trailer in the first 10 minutes because watching the trailer you think, "Oh, it's just this kind of late night talk show guy who says, I want to talk to the devil," and that's it. But in the first 10 minutes, you get this other side that you weren't quite expecting to Jack Delroy. There's this
Right.
weird Bohemian Grove style thing where there's rich elites like having ceremonies with owls, and there's the illusion that this might be where Jack had perhaps met this entity before. They don't really go into it or spoil it, but it's definitely there. So I was like, oh, I kind of wanted to be on Jack Delroy's side, but he's not as much of an innocent as I had imagined. This could have just
That's
been
again the
guy
brilliance
gets
of the film.
right, but is this could have just been three paths: innocent meets the devil, hell breaks loose.
Right.
Person who is subject to the corruptions of showbiz meets the devil, all hell breaks loose. This is guy, it's unclear if he made any kind of like a deal with the devil or a pact to get famous, or if he was famous and that's how he was allowed into this society, but it
Yeah.
definitely worked on his personal life. And yeah, there's so much here beyond the premise of, oh, it's a found footage about a TV talk show where the devil shows up. You could almost watch this thing, I think, 4 times and come away with 4 different essays about what it means.
Well, we're pretty lucky in the Chicago film community that David started here as a theater actor out of Kansas City, came to Chicago to establish himself as a theater actor. Got the big break when he went to do The Dark Knight. He has a great story about that, by the way. But he's very connected to the Chicago community. So I'm a huge cheerleader for him. I've been lucky enough to talk to him several times. In fact, I want to send you my link to the Late Night with the Devil interview because it's very revealing. But I wish, in a sense, but to your point about what his character was about, it's very interesting to me. Things I hadn't considered before. But this was done in a very short time. It was done on one set in 20 days. And sometimes I hate to hear that because it, character development and kind of stuff, because the Cairnes had one vision of who this guy was. David had another vision, of course, having grown up in American television, where Carson and Cavett and the daytime talk shows, people like Merv Griffin. There was a lot of stuff going through his character, and at times I was wishing the character would be a little more consistent, but it still was a very interesting take on the situation that he was in. To your point, and that's just a minor opinion. I have a great admiration for this film.
Yeah, I mean, as do I. It is kind of I'm not sure exactly what I wanted from the ending because it was one of those
Right.
movies where it just kept getting better and better and better. So the
Right.
end really would have had to have been a banger to end on a perfect note. And for me, it doesn't quite end on a perfect note. I'm trying to
Yeah,
think,
it leaves you at the end. Yeah.
well, and I was trying to look this up because I can't remember the name of it, darn it. But there was a movie that came out starring Jim O'Hare from a number of years ago, where
Uh-huh.
he played a struggling comedian who never quite made it, and ends up going through like this kind of psychotic episode. Uh, I'll have to look it up because I interviewed him about it like back in 2016. But at the end, it's a very similar ending to Late Night with the Devil, where he kind of there's a moment where he wakes up and there's like dead bodies around him on this kind of show business set, as we say, and we're not quite sure where the truth lies. Now
I think
that
I
is,
remember that.
yeah, it was, yeah, it
Yeah.
wasn't the comedian,
I
it was
like
something
Jim
like that.
O'Hare too.
Yeah, he's great. I talked to him
Yeah.
twice in the course of like 6 months. We had two different interviews for two different films, but that's the thing is like with Late Night with the Devil, because they decide to go this more, most of the film is so grounded in the reality that they're trying to build that when they
Right.
step off into surreality, it's like, I can't quite go there with you. Like it was so tight and then it was really loose.
That's when, yeah. Well, that's when the hypnosis level started to come higher to me than this is really actually happening, because suddenly your mind is like, going into a realm of I don't know what to call it. Well, surreal is the best thing I guess you could say, but there's still some synapses cracking right now, and you're just like, okay, what am I looking at here now? What am I doing? That's crazy that you meant. It was so wild. I'm not a horror buff, as you know, and to get something that creative in the horror realm is so surprising to me. There's a lot of that going on right now, which is great. I would say the last, let's say, 10 years has been a golden age for new voices in horror doing things that we're not expecting in that space and creating actual cinema. So this was a cinematic movie at the same time being a horror film.
Right. And I think that's I don't want to call this elevated horror because I think that's kind of
Yeah,
almost a dismissive term to the genre as a
it
whole,
is.
but it's not like a slasher or a demon like freak out movie. It is sort of a slow burn. I mean, someone I think referred to it as like Rosemary's Baby meets Network or something like that. And I
Yeah,
think that
yeah,
that's kind of fitting.
it's
It is a movie
good
for
comparison.
adults that it puts you in a time and place and you're just wondering when are things going to go off the rails. I My biggest question coming out of this, and it's something that on the one hand I was unsatisfied because I really wanted to know, but on the other hand I'm glad they kept the mystery. We open up with this, and I think at the end it goes to black and it says so it is complete or something like that. There's like this weird video tagline at the end. It's very subtle.
Right.
But we start off this idea of a documentary talking about this famous event that happened on American television. I'm wondering what was the effect of this broadcast? Did they cut it off? Did it cause people to freak out? Did a lot of people get possessed? Did they get hypnotized? Kind of to your point, like what? This is a documentary, but I don't know about the world in which it was made.
Well, it's obviously the parallel universe because it's a fictional film,
Right.
um, but if we know anything about broadcast, it it's even that time, this time, anytime. If something like that happens on the set, that is you go to like the technical difficulty panel, and that's it. So we don't know. To your point, we don't know when that was cut off. When the first freak out happens, was it a mass hypnosis event? We don't know, but we're pulling the plug on this sucker, and then the rest of it happens without it going on the air. But the presumption in the narrative is that everybody witnessed this or witnessed it again the next day on the news, and it changed everything forever. So a lot of
Or
mystery there, a lot of mystery.
or
A lot of
yeah,
good stuff, good mystery.
but my question is, did it change anything? Because you think about,
Ah,
this was only like 40 years or so after War of the Worlds. Could they have played it
right,
off as like, oh, it was the most elaborate
possibly. Yeah,
prank in history. We are trying to do this to
right,
beat Carson and we did it, but
right,
Jack will be
right,
back next week or something like that.
right,
Um,
right, right.
but yeah, I really wanted to know, but on the other hand, yeah, I admired the guts of filmmakers who are willing to put this out there just as its own thing and say, okay, now what do you think happened? Now, sometimes I don't like that vagary, but I think this is such a complete package that it invites you to imagine rather than invites you to figure out, okay, what are the massive plot holes? I don't have to fill that in because I didn't see any.
Well, it was also a nice reference to the War of the Worlds because that happened on Halloween night as well. And one of the backgrounders I read about this is they picked 1977 because it was a Monday night and Halloween was on a Monday night. And they could have been wink, wink, nudge, nudge to the War of the Worlds. This is just another stunt that allows the tension to occur. I'm currently reading an anecdotal history of the Oscars, and there's a nice section on Wells because he really did bamboozle a lot of people with that broadcast, and the media around him, i.e., the movies, news, whatever you want to call it, radio, they were pissed. And even when he came into town to do Citizen Kane, eventually he didn't come into town intentionally to do Kane; he just landed on it. It was still an overriding theme among the mediarati, if you want to call it, your gossip columnists, your movies, your radio back in the day. And that really affected his career as much as the parallel to William Randolph Hearst and Citizen Kane. So nice callback on that one. Nice one.
That
Because
completely
it really
coincidentally
does.
too.
Right. Well, yeah, but it does parallel nicely with the questions we have regarding Late Night with the Devil. And it's definitely a theory that I think is totally legit. Jack will be back next week after this incredible rendering of our Satanic Panic on Halloween night of 1977. Where, like Wells said at the end of the War of the Worlds, it's the equivalent of us coming from a bush and saying boo. So here we go.
Well, the last thing I want to mention is
Yep.
Rhys O'Terry, the actor who played Gus, who was the sort of the Ed
Yes.
McMahon character.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I thought he was just terrific. I mean, everybody in this movie is great at what they do, from the biggest parts to the little parts. But this
Yep.
Gus guy, I thought he was just going to be the sidekick guy who's kind of like laughing along, and maybe he heads for the hills or he gets killed early on or something. But he's there throughout most of the movie. I won't
Right.
say why that is, but you really do get to see shades of this character, and a lot of the supporting characters, the staff, kind of breaking from the hypnosis of showbiz. Like, yeah, it's great. It's a great job. I get to be around famous people or whatever, but this is getting weird, and I don't think this is right. And what, do you listen to your producer and shut up and get back in line, or do you take a stand? It's another level to what we're looking at here just as a horror film.
It's a real nice piece of casting too. I mean, he looked like the quintessential sidekick of that era, sort of like what Larry Sanders did with Hank. That you're finding the guy who is going to be the eternal sidekick. McMahon is the standard, obviously, but how do you create another McMahon without creating McMahon? They found a way, which I really appreciated as a aficionado of the era. Well, aficionado and having lived it.
Well,
I'm old. I'm so goddamn old.
Well, but that's okay because it allows you to give context and further appreciation to a movie that takes place in 1977, the year I was born, and you were getting out of high school.
Right.
But But I got to get out of here because I'm about to
Yeah.
do another show in like 15 minutes. Believe it or not.
And tune
But,
in, everybody. You want to hear this discussion about Ghostbusters because it could end everything we know about Ghostbusters.
I'll just say this, Pat. Thanks for the plug, by the way, for a
Yeah,
live
no
stream that will
worries.
have happened 2 days before this episode airs. But you can go back and watch it on the replay. But yes, watch Late Night with the Devil and watch Late Night with the Devil 5 times and skip Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. But if you do watch it 5 times, definitely have a Bible handy. But anyway, Pat
I love that
McDonald.
story. Easter week again, another successful Easter week for us. Thank you again for doing this. I really appreciate it. And Kathleen, I broke it. I finally did it. I watched The Passion of the Christ. We can discuss this later.
Well, hey, record it and then I'll link it here. No, but no, Pat, HollywoodChicago.com. Does you mentioned the David Dastmalchian interview? Is that for Hollywood Chicago? Okay.
Yes, sir. And I'll send you the link, and you can reference it in the below part if you like. If not, that's all right. That's cool.
Oh, for sure. I've got to. I can't wait to watch it.
It's a good one. It's a good one. It's a real nice backgrounder of what he was attempting to do in the film. And I think it could be a nice breakout. I think the film's over doing some good business. I think it's over the close to the 5 million mark, maybe heading toward 10. He did 666 on Sunday. That's right.
Yeah.
666. Nice publicity stunt, boys. But we'll believe it.
Wow.
We'll believe it.
Yeah.
So go see Late Night with the Devil for sure.
Yeah, if you can find it, because it's playing, I know, in like a lot of art house theaters and smaller venues, but if it's in traveling distance, definitely go check it out. I bet it's a big, a fun crowd movie. And if you can't see it, it'll be, I think, on Shudder next month. I think I read.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. So yeah,
Shudder's
definitely check it out.
Some great stuff too. Shudder's a player, man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm done playing with you, sir, but it's been fun. I always have a great time with our conversations, Pat, and we'll be back in a couple of months talking about another anniversary year of some kind. Yeah.
Excellent.
But thanks for doing this double header with me, and have a blessed Good Friday and a blessed Easter, sir.
You too. Good on you, and I'm glad to hear that Bible works.
It can. It took me 44 years to catch on, but I'm finally on my way. All right. Thanks again, sir. Blessings. And folks out there, if you like the show, like and subscribe, support Pat. All of his information is down below. And until next time, whatever that is, thanks very much and take care.